What lessons you learned, either one, about what you might have done differently in terms of the structure of the organization and how it proceeded?
Well, organizationally, I mean, we started out without any sort of plan. We just started visiting places, finding animals left for dead, and taking them home. The way we funded the organization in the early days was by selling vegetarian hot dogs at Grateful Dead concerts. So it was very much a day-by-day kind of thing. So what would I do differently? Probably nothing. Would I suggest that you do what we did? I don't know. I think the best piece of advice is to start slowly and to not get in over your head. To not, once you've taken an animal, that's a commitment. And you want to be sure that you're able to meet that commitment. So, and in terms of structurally, we've got a board of directors. And as the organization has grown, it's sort of organically grown to include more folks that are more sort of business oriented. And I'm an activist. So, we're going through budget stuff right now. I'm really glad we have some business type people on the board that are working on that. So you need to involve experts in particular areas. On the shelter, we have some great staff people that know the animals, know what they need, and they've learned by doing and by working with veterinarians at places like Cornell University, our New York farm, and UC Davis, our California farm. But you call on the expertise. But when you're dealing with veterinarians, as I just mentioned them, you also need to recognize that a lot of times veterinarians have been acculturated to believe certain things that could stand to be questioned. Like at Cornell and other large animal veterinarians, they tend to see farm animals as commodities. So it's good to get different opinions off with a number of issues. How's the dialogue with the animal industry changed? How's it been? It's evolving. It's evolving. In fact, just this week on Wednesday, I spoke at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. On Thursday, I spoke in Iowa at the invitation of the National Pork Board. At their invitation. And I talked with them about growing plants instead of animals. Instead of taking this grain and feeding it to animals, to take this grain and feed it to people. And they sometimes are pretty hostile. They believe in what they're doing. They believe that raising animals is a noble cause and they're feeding the world. And I tell them that feeding the world is a noble cause, but we should ask ourselves what's the most efficient and effective way to feed the world. Is it by raising animals or is it by growing plants? And I say that the scientific evidence is clearest by raising plants, not animals.
That's absolutely true. I totally agree with you. How do you deal with, they're going to say, well, they know full well as well, you just raise plants, you have to raise a lot less plants.
A lot less plants, yeah.
Yeah, and so farmers don't like that because,
well, the system right now is set up to be, yeah, it's crazy, where there's a lot of corn and soy production, so there's a lot of money being made in this. But there's also a lot of money being made by giving people drugs and heart medications. And we just need to sort of step back and ask ourselves, what do we want? Do we want to spend a lot of money on medications and a lot of energy on growing a lot of plants to feed a lot of animals? I mean, do we want to do that? Or do we want to have a little extra land for wildlife? A little extra time to maybe hang out in the woods and enjoy nature a bit? And not have heart attacks? I mean, I think when you look at it, oftentimes, like in the US and probably here in Canada too, welfare of our society is measured as GDP. As we spend more, our welfare is going up. I don't think that's necessarily right. We spend more when we have cancer, when we have litigation, when we have battles and wars. I mean, the spending goes up. That doesn't mean our life has improved. So I think that we need to sort of step back and ask those kinds of questions, and it's got priorities. But the industry is coming to really, I think, respect where we're coming from and recognizing that our arguments are pretty solid and that they're going to have to deal with them. And that means, I think, at the minimum, the way animals are being raised is going to change, and they are starting to shift away from some of the worst cruelties. But in the long term, I think it means they're going to have to move towards more plant production, and maybe all plant production, and less or no animal production.
There's way more animals to take care of than you can possibly do, so how do you deal with this?
Yeah, no, you're right. There are way more than we can deal with. So we actually just we don't take them in. So that means we have to say no. And that's not easy, but it's the reality. And, you know, in the US, there are 10 billion farm animals raised every year. Those are land animals. If you add the fish, it's a lot more. And so we take care of as many as we can. But right now we have like 1,000 animals between our two farms. That's not very many when you compare it to 10 billion. So even if we rescued 10,000 animals, that's still not that many compared to 10 billion. If we cared for 500,000 animals, that's still not that many compared to 10 billion. So the animals that come to Farm Sanctuary are the ambassadors. And we tell their stories. And so we rescue animals, but we do a lot more because we can't make much of a dent in the problem just by the rescue side.
What do you do for fun?
What do you do? I love playing Ultimate Frisbee. I love Ultimate Frisbee. And where I'm living down near Washington, D.C. now, there's 4 days a week, there's an Ultimate Frisbee game going on somewhere. So I do that. I like running. I like just being in nature. And I kind of like sports. Too much, probably. So I do a variety of things like that. I wish I could say I read a lot. And I read a little bit, but I wish I read more than I do. But nature's really the best thing. And then playing Frisbee. At our hoedowns every year, we have some pretty crazy dancing going on. So that's pretty fun. And this is fun to me, you know? So I do this for fun. The way I see it, factory farming is sort of this aberration. We kind of came to the pinnacle of it when citizens were not thinking much about it. And as citizens start thinking, they're moving away from it. Now they're going to meat that's raised less cruelly, but it's still cruel and unnecessary. But it's a step away from that pinnacle of horror. Here's the veganic Eden we want to create. And these are small steps away from it. Organic farming, plant-based is farming, it's organic, is positive, but it still uses meat and bone meal and blood meal. So it's not technically veganic. So that's way further down here, but it's still not perfect. And even when we get down close to the veganic, are we plowing up the soil? Whose habitat are we destroying there? So this is a continuum. And if somebody's eating factory farm, they started eating not factory farm, that's a step in the right direction. And once a step is taken, then you encourage them to take the next step. And the next step. So when somebody says they're doing something and moving, because a lot of this is about the direction something is moving. If it's moving in the right direction, we'll say that's great that you're doing that, and be encouraging and supportive of it, instead of immediately saying, well gosh, that's still terrible. Say, that's good that you recognize this factory farming is bad, and that you don't want to support it, but did you also know that these situations are not usually as good as they sound? And it's an ongoing process. But I think that this move towards less factory farming is part of the broader move towards vegan living. So I think it's part of the whole process. That's how I look at that. So people do say that, and we just keep nudging them along the process.